In light of the Boston Marathon bombing, security in the Philippines immediately became a national concern. The Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry and security agencies have partnered with the government to ensure safety and satisfaction of local and international tourists. Joining us in the studio is security professional Esmeralda. He's also the editor-in-chief of Security Matters magazine, to tell us more about emergency response and how to strengthen security links in the country. Good morning, Ace.
Good morning.
To start with, how is an act of terrorism defined? What constitutes an act of terror?
I think the act of terror is simply defined as a very drastic, detrimental, fatal, and something that is really getting the attention of the media. A lot of the attacks now cannot just be defined as terror attacks. Others will just throw a grenade into their enemies, but then a act of terror is something that has that motive. So if you take it in the context of Boston Marathon, it is really an act of terrorism, even as defined by President Obama. But then you have to ask yourselves, who is a terror group? Is it really a terror group, or is it an act of an individual? But an individual may not be a terrorist per se as defined, but then his actions, like putting those two bombs there, could define as act of terrorism, simply because the people were terrorized, that you are emotionally affected.
But nobody has claimed responsibility for the bombings.
Yes, the absence of claimants of the bombing may be quite surprising for a lot of people, because we stereotype acts of terrorism as something that with the motive of getting media mileage. Groups with intentions or motives, they usually resort to such an activity in order to draw attention. Because it's more emotional, the emotions are affected. If the people will just be not minding it, then sometimes we don't call it as an act of terror. If you consider the environment of, say, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and in Iraq,
they're in a constant
they
state
have
of
weekly
terror.
bombings that kills more than 3 dozens of people, but then sometimes they said that's the way of life. Okay, so that's really how we define terrorism. The more, say, the more or soft the target is, the more impact of any terror attack.
Should this be a cause for concern for us here in the Philippines with that particular incident, with that recent incident?
Yes, it will be a cause of concern, because if you look at the context, in the Philippines we have unabated possession of firearms, explosives, blasting caps, all the ingredients of an improvised explosive device are there. Probably in my experience, we haven't seen anyone using a pressure cooker, because I have said earlier, it's expensive. So in my experience, our insurgents before, they use landmines, which is typically or actually an improvised explosive device, and they use only paint cans. So the same thing there in Boston, they use, or the bomber, it could be one person, use a pressure cooker, because for them that's the most decent or available, and it's very cheap in their area.
So locally, we don't have to wait for signs in order for us to beef up our security.
Yes.
We always have to be in constant vigilance to ensure, like for example, the MMDA has recently ordered those who are going to be holding major events to have a security management plan. I'm assuming that it's supposed to be automatic.
Yes.
In any major event wherein there are many people involved, there should be a security plan. Do you think we're lax with our security here in our country?
Yes, we're lax. In some sense, our standards of security are varying in dependent on who are the proponents. In terms of, say, government reaction to such incident in Boston Marathon, it's very typical. It's a knee-jerk reaction. You ask for a security management plan, as if you're assuming that the event organizers don't have security plans. The event organizers, it's just like an event. Even if it's an event in a mall or in a secure area like, say, Coliseum or the usual concert halls, you can have a very simple but effective security plan. But requiring security plans for marathons, and if it's 42 kilometers and it covers several provinces or towns, that's really a challenge.
But it can be done.
It can be done.
And it should be done.
It can be done. If you look at the Boston Marathon, there's that plan. There's that security plan. But then we should strike a balance between a security plan that could be a military lockdown, and then the convenience of the public. But remember, most of our activities, they have a commercial value. In a marathon, if I have to define, a marathon is in an open space. It's a stretch, it's very linear. And then you promote marathon so that people will line up in the streets, and those people lining up in the streets will patronize the commercial areas at the sides. So a pressure cooker may come from even from any of the restaurants. See, but if you have a marathon and then you are paranoid and then you don't do credible risk assessment, then a lot of security people will just say, okay, let's put barriers. And then they thought that putting barriers in areas is already a security plan. But actually you're putting more safety issues because there are areas of obstacles against the movement of the public. So those are the challenges. But yes.
And lastly, sir, I guess in the absence of any major event, even in our own homes, even in our own offices, what would you like to give to us, or what is the one thing or two things you'd like to remind us to ensure that we're safe in our houses and we're safe in our offices?
Well, number one really is security awareness. That's why we really want to educate the general public about what is really security. When we talk about security in the Philippines, we always associate it with security guards. But security starts the moment we wake up, even before we put on our makeups, because it's security and safety issues are still at our home. It could be a slippery floor in the bathroom, all those things. But when you go out of your house and then you go to your office or to your place of work or to recreation, the next thing you have to do is situational awareness. A lot of us are, say, security or aware of security, but sometimes we are not attached to our environment. So when we say attached, it can go also to our government's connections or government actions to private or corporate events. There is still that disconnect. See,
so we should be aware of our surroundings.
Yes, always be aware of surroundings, because that's why if you look at the FBI plea, or they're asking the public that if you have seen anything unusual, if you go to other countries like say in Singapore, they always remind their people to report suspicious packages, even suspicious movements of people, not suspicious people.
So we shouldn't be waiting for any major events. We should always be on our toes to always to be aware of our surroundings and to know what to do in case of emergency.
Yes, we should always be. That's the role of companies that has very credible security or asset protection groups. They should be aiming that security should always be top of mind, because safety and security is everybody's concern.
Thank you so much, Ace, for joining us this morning. I've just spoken with Ace Esmeralda. He's a security expert and editor-in-chief of Security Matters magazine.